AfriKili family, Global Pack Nation, welcome to the Global Pack Show. Starting with Coco Gauff, the 21-year-old black tennis star from the United States, won her second Grand Slam. She finally won the Roland Garros French Open, which is played on clay, one of the hardest tennis tournaments. She's been trying for so long, finally got it. But then, in the aftermath of that victory, as she's going through press conferences, her opponent, instead of bowing, down and just accepting defeat and displaying sportsmanship, made a baffling display of disrespect towards Coco Gauff. Comments that just took the world by storm and totally underestimated and undermined the fantastic victory of Coco Gauff. What is that all about? But also, Donald Trump continues to break the United States of America. I mean, he's continuing his war on immigration from black and brown people, with the latest installment being the National Guard being called in California. That's not it, though. It seems like beside Donald Trump in the United States, there's a trend that seems to be rising up across the Western world. Because when we look at Schengen or the European countries, we seem to see a similar trend with people from Africa and just black people in general increasingly being denied visas to go into the Schengen zone, which is the zone of 29 European countries. So we'll discuss that and more on today's show. So let's fasten our seatbelts, let's dive in, and let's get to work. All right, AfriKili family, Global Pack Nation, welcome again. This is Tony Mfumusimba Kwamba Mangumbu. Pleasure as always to be once again in front of you on this show, the Global Pack Show, on this Tuesday, June 10th, 2025. It has been a while. It's been about a week since we have been together, and in this, this world of crazy news cycle, I mean, we're 24 hours means that you've missed so much. 7 days seems like an eternity, but thank you for your support. Thank you for those of you that support this show. Much appreciated. And so for those of you who have not done so, before we get started, let me ask you to please take a moment. If you can just click on the subscribe button, only takes a second. But then by doing so, it allows you to be part of this platform, allows you to help this platform grow as we go forward. All right, so today, this will be a very, very quick show. It's been a few days, but we'll just kind of do our regular quick roundup. But the theme today will be very immigration themed. We will look at some of the things that are happening in Europe, but also some of the things happening in the United States. And there seems to be this tendency whereas immigration from black and brown people is just suffering across the board. And we'll just kind of look at that and see what happens. But we'll also look at Elon Musk, the very unpopular Elon Musk with his feud with Donald Trump. But there seems to be more than meets the eye. There's some economic incentives that are increasingly revealed that I think should be very disturbing for many of us. But before doing that, let's just review a quick news here. I want to touch about something happening in Central Africa because I think this is very significant. With the conflict that is ongoing between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, we've covered that at length on this show. Nevertheless, something just happened, whereas the country of Rwanda decided to pull away from the Central African Community. All right, so it's called ECCAS, and so it stands for the Economic Community of Central African State, ECAS or ECCAS. This is fairly significant because if you're not familiar with this, kind of like when I often talk about about the CARICOM on this show, CARICOM being the Caribbean community, this body that englobes most of the countries in the Caribbean. Well, in Africa being so huge, you have many different blocks, right? You have ECOWAS, you have SADC, which is Southern African. So you have different blocks that englobe countries in different regions. And so Rwanda and the DRC are essentially both part of the East African community, that's the EAC, but also part of this ECCAS. And Rwanda decided to pull out because as it was Rwanda's turn to assume leadership of this body. Well, the country of Guinea said, wait a second, we will not allow Rwanda to take leadership of this central African regional body because of the conflict that is currently ongoing between Rwanda and the United States, and Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There's a lot of pressure, if you've been following it, that seems to be coming from all corners. The United States also, very recently there was a report that came through the American news channel called NBC that just laid bare, Rwanda's involvement in this conflict in the Congo. How Rwanda has been behind that instrumentalization. On the other side, you also have the DRC, which was just elected in the United Nations to become the latest. The latest UN Security Council non-permanent member, because within the United Nations, you have the Security Council, and you have 5 permanent members that have the right to veto, votes and so on. But then you have a rotation where countries are elected to serve on 2-year terms, and there's a rotation happening. Well, the DRC was just elected along with Bahrain, Colombia, Latvia, and Liberia. So you have 2 African countries to be on the Security Council non-permanent body. This is instrumental because some people underestimate the United Nations, but it's still a very powerful body that influences, policy and governance across the world. Well, so you have all this confluence of events, whereas Rwanda is now feeling increasingly pressured and targeted. I should say at least the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame. Congo being elected. You have Guinea and other countries refusing to give Rwanda the leadership of the ECCAS. You have international pressure. Not that long ago, you had Dr. Denis Mukwege, who's the Nobel Peace Prize. He's also from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Well, he issued there's a tribune, right, where he was able to gather many different Nobel Peace Prizes, but also economic Nobels and from across the world to sign that tribune. So Rwanda is in the eye of the storm. I wanted to mention this to start with because, again, that region is such a significant region in the world. Granted, it's my country of origin, the Congo, but it goes beyond that, because the Congo has been called by many as the richest country in the world when it comes to its natural resources. So much, mineral wealth underneath its soil, which is the reason why the country is constantly undergoing all this conflict for over 30 years now. You had the U.S. envoy that was just sent in that region, Mr. Masad Bulos. There is a contract currently being negotiated where potentially the U.S. could get rare earth minerals from the DRC. The DRC has cobalt that's needed for the green revolution in the world. So all the minerals are there. So it's a region that is so important. And the fact that Rwanda had been a significant factor for the instability in that region, and now that all that pressure is being put on Rwanda, kind of tells me that there is a transition that is ongoing. So this is a situation that is worth keeping an eye on, because as many people will agree, if that region becomes stabilized, the Great Lake region, right? If the DRC and that region finally stabilizes, I believe Africa will take off. It is Frantz Fanon who said Africa has the shape of a gun and the trigger is in the DRC, the Congo. So the Congo is very central to the elevation of Africa, but the elevation of the global PAC in general, right? The global Pan-African community, which, as you know, the mission of this show is to build coalitions and strong bridges across the global PAC. So people of African descent across the world, but also different African countries, because we believe that stronger ties between the big Pan-African diaspora will lead to an elevation of people of African descent across the world. And the DRC, again, is a significant player in that. When the DRC stabilizes and takes ownership of its destiny, given its vast wealth, that country would play a massive role. in the elevation of the global pack. So I wanted to start with that. Now, moving on very quickly, the main theme of today's show would be, well, one of the main themes will be immigration in terms of like the news roundup. There seems to be this increasing situation where black people or brown and black people are having a tough time being accepted when it comes to immigration. Because, for example, there was a report that came out that looked at Schengen. Schengen is the countries of the European Union. So you have about 29 countries. Schengen, it's an agreement that was signed in 1995. That means that about 29 countries in Europe eliminated their borders. So you have free movement of goods and people within Europe. So when you get a visa, when you're outside of that zone, you want to go to Europe, you get a visa in one country, you can circulate through all the countries. So that's the Schengen zone. So they have one external border for international travel. Well, African travelers are hit the hardest. A report came out that says that essentially Africans and black people face the biggest rejection rate in their application for visas to go into the Schengen or into Europe, whether it's for education, whether it's for touristic purposes. Estimation going between 45 and 63% of demands that are being rejected, primarily countries like Comoros, Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, Nigeria, and Ghana. Those are the countries that receive the most rejections. And this is pretty nuts because in a way, it's as if Africans are paying to be rejected, because you have to understand that every time you submit a visa application, it is not free. For Europe, it's typically 90 euros. Okay, so about $100, and that's non-refundable. It is estimated that somewhere upwards of 60 million pounds, or about $67 million, were spent by Africans in 2024 alone. So in 1 year, about 64 or $67 million that African paid for visas that were visa applications that were rejected. So essentially funding a program, and usually, if you're not in a part of the world, you probably do not understand how hard it is to be vetted, to be led into those countries when you submit a visa application. But we have numbers going between 45 and 63% of requests that are denied. So that is very, very unfortunate. So the top 10 most affected countries, you have the Comoros, 62% of applications that are rejected. Guinea-Bissau, that's Guinea, about 47% of applications. Senegal, 46% of applications rejected. Nigeria, 45% of visa application from Nigerians wanting to go to Europe get rejected. Congo Brazzaville, Central Africa, 43%. Burundi, 40%. Ethiopia, about 36%. So this is really unfortunate, and we see all the time that African government wanting to build partnerships with European nations and so on. But this is of the many reasons why we are advocating and fighting for stronger tie and stronger coalition within the global PAC, right? The global Pan-African communities, is because Africans and nations of African descent get disrespected way too easily, because we do not weigh heavily in the balance into the geopolitical arena, because we usually approach issues not in a block, right? In a very dispersed fashion. So, for example, in this case, when the Schengen rejects visas for people coming from, say, Congo Brazzaville or Nigeria, it's not as if the entire global PAC or the entire African Union will stand up and say, no, you cannot treat our citizens that way, because we lack that unity. So the mission of platforms such as these that are advocating and fighting for coalitions and bridges between the global PAC has its place in the world. If we want the narrative to change, if we want better respect for people coming from Black nations, African nations, but also in the Caribbean, Latin America, we need to be able to have unified voice to attack certain issues such as this. This is clear injustice. Because the other way around, it's like any European that wants to go to Africa, it's almost a guaranteed visa. One might say the numbers are not the same. You have way more wanting to go to Europe versus the other way around. But still, in diplomatic relationships, you need to have a reciprocity. But when you do not weigh economically or so on, you want to advocate as one nation, that becomes problematic. So this is very unfortunate what is happening in Schengen. And so this continues in Italy. So in Italy, still within the same theme of just black and brown people, for some reason, continuing to be, I would say, discriminated in this case, right? There's a sense of racism that is out there in the world. Well, in Italy, there was a referendum, whereas activists and so on wanted to change the citizenship law. Because in Italy right now, you have to be in Italy for about 10 years before you can apply as a citizen. So there was a referendum where, people obtained signatures and had a ballot measure asking Italians questions if they would agree to reduce the number of years from 10 years to 5 years to become a citizen. And so people like the Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who is from the extreme right, her party is the Brothers of Italy. She's somebody who came into power on an anti-immigration sentiment because Italy happens to be one of the first, I would say, stopping point. There's a lot of when illegal migrants get on boats from North Africa, from countries like Tunisia, Morocco, cross the Mediterranean, try to get to Europe. Well, there's an island called Lampedusa, which is on the south of Italy, that takes in a lot of immigrants. That is a fact. Which also indicates that you need to have a stronger African continent, economically viable, that gives young people hope, so that less and less people would feel the incentive to want to cross under dangerous conditions. Remember, last week I did a show of how a boat capsized and people died. But anyways, so with that migration vague into Europe, that created this anti-immigration sentiment, especially in Italy. And so that allowed Giorgia Meloni, the current prime minister, to become the prime minister. Well, guess what? When this referendum was put on the table, she essentially went on the media and said, you know what? She will go to the ballot box, but she will not vote, as a way of boycotting this referendum. And you needed at least 50% of Italians to go to the ballot to be able for this measure to be valid. Only about 30% showed up in the ballot box, so the measure was defeated. And Giorgia Meloni actually obviously celebrated the defeat of this referendum measure, which means, as of now, you still need to live about 10 years on Italian soil before you can become an Italian. And again, the measure here is really to prevent many immigrants or migrants from sub-Saharan Africa or North Africa from becoming Italians because of that immigration wave. So it is clear as that. Continuing this immigration, let's now move on to the US. You saw the latest ban by Donald Trump. When Donald Trump was on the campaign trail, he promised that if he was to be reelected, he would reinstall his travel ban that he had the first time he was around. And 12 nations, in this case, have been banned. The majority are African nations. You have countries such as Sudan, Libya, Somalia, Equatorial Guinea, Chad, that are banned from visiting. Congo Brazzaville, which is in Central Africa. So you have the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which was colonized by Belgium. And then on the border, you have the other Congo Brazzaville, which is much smaller, which was colonized by France. This is the same Congo Brazzaville that also has one of the highest rates of visa rejections in Schengen. So these countries here have a travel ban. So Trump just issued a travel ban. And he is gone through submitting a lot of reasoning why these countries are on the list. You also have countries such as Haiti, unfortunately, that is on the list. You have non-African and non-black countries like Afghanistan and so on. But the one thing you'll see, all of these countries are black and brown countries, and mostly black countries. So they're saying things like, for example, in Somalia and Libya, they're saying these are safe havens for terrorists. Okay. Then you have countries such as Haiti. There's the administration is saying that there's hundreds of thousands of illegal Haitians that flooded into the United States during the Biden administration. And so now they need to be banned. And now also remember the Trump administration suspended the temporary protective status, right? TPS, which allowed people from Venezuela, Haiti, and so on to be illegal in the US. They already revoked that. So now they're banning Haitians for even getting visas from coming in the US. There's a travel ban for Haitians. The reason why, to say they're already flooded in the US. And then you have countries such as Chad, Congo Brazzaville, and Equatorial Guinea. The reasoning is that they're saying that a lot of people from these countries have overstayed their visa. So the funny thing is, with this problem of overstaying their visas, you have actually people from Europe, from the West, that overstay their visas in higher number than people from, say, Chad, Congo Brazzaville, and Equatorial Guinea. If you will use the reason of people overstaying their visas, you have European countries again, people who overstay their visas longer in the US versus those countries, and yet those countries are not on the travel ban. So it is situations like this, which initially might have been hard to call the Trump administration a racist administration, but clearly when you have situations like this, there's no other word that can qualify this as other than racist measures. And it is very, very unfortunate. And then you have other, partial restrictions, countries like Cuba and so on. So, and also interestingly enough, with all these travel bans, remember the whole issue about the fake genocide of Afrikaners, where there was a first wave of about 59 white South Africans that were let into the US under the false pretense that there was a white genocide happening, which is absolutely false. Even though that is clearly false, and media outlets around the world have debunked that there's no white genocide, guess what? There's another wave of those Afrikaners that are continuing to come, continuing to be let into the United States, even now, although the claim is totally false. Again, white South Africans are being let in. You have people from Europe being overstaying their visas without consequence, but then you have people from black and brown nations denied access. How else, again, to qualify this if not that this is clearly a racist measure? The war on immigration continues, and Donald Trump continues to break the United States because with the same anti-sentiment of the sentiment of anti-black and brown immigration, which also falls in line with this whole great replacement theory where black and brown people are coming to replace us. What's happening in California, unfortunately, is the same situation. Donald Trump went ahead and essentially allowed the National Guard to be deployed in California, right? I know you've been following the news. There's clashes in California. He allowed also Marines to go, 700 Marines, and he allowed even more National Guard, like 2,000 more. And this is a situation where the local law enforcement absolutely had the ability to handle that. We've had riots before in the past. The Trump administration here utilizing all kind of false pretenses about invasions and otherwise. But this is just another clear case of how this administration is hell-bent on waging war against immigration from black and brown people. It is as simple as that. And the surrounding of Donald Trump in his administration, you have a lot of white supremacists that are leading all this policy effort, people like Stephen Miller and otherwise, that are leading all these policy initiatives that are clearly racist. And again, this is very, very unfortunate. 25 minutes. I wanted the show to only go for 30 minutes. I have two more pieces of stories I wanted to cover. Maybe I'll just cover one because I want to talk about Elon Musk, still him, with the corruption. Now that we're done with immigration, just to conclude, the big corruption that's unfolding. Elon Musk, and then we have Coco Gauff, who won the French Open. You know what? I will not go deep into this because really I wanted this show to be very short. But just very quickly, with the feud between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, there's more and more information that is coming out. On one end, obviously, Elon Musk, his companies like SpaceX and so on have benefited tremendously from federal government, federal contract. For example, if you look at SpaceX, the company essentially, since 2008, has received nearly $21 billion from federal funding. So, and last year, about 3.4 billion. So now with the feud between Donald Trump and Elon Musk, there's information coming out, but also Donald Trump is threatening to take away some of the federal contract. So this just kind of tells you how, to all of you out there that like to say African leaders and black leaders are corrupted, you have a clear case here where there's obviously no issue with conflict of interest. You have an advisor who is super close to the president, who's benefiting tremendously through his companies, directly benefiting. And then you have a president that's wanting to use that to threaten him, saying that, okay, I might take away some of this federal contract. So what are the quid pro quos here? There's clearly a massive level of corruption, but also very quickly, there's a ProPublica article that came out that talked about how the State Department, led by Marco Rubio, was pressuring many African nations to provide licenses to Elon Musk so that his Starlink satellite company would operate in some of those countries. Remember when we analyzed the debacle that happened in the White House when Donald Trump welcomed the South African president Cyril Ramaphosa, and we tried analyzing some of the reasoning, and I mentioned this reasoning about Starlink, where Elon Musk is utilizing a lot of that sentiment, right? He's clinging on to an extreme right fallacy about genocide, but as a mechanism to put pressure on the South African government. And so this ProPublica article that comes out demonstrate how, yes, the State Department, they're using the power of the U.S. government to pressuring nations and forcing them to give contracts to Elon Musk. I mean, I will maybe touch upon that on a future show, but essentially maximum pressure from the State Department. Methods that are clearly corruption methods. People are talking about crony capitalism. There's a lot of shady stuff happening within this administration. And you have, on one end, the MAGA folks that are deciding to put blindfolders on when this is a rotten system that is just taking hold. All right, my time is almost up. To finish very quickly, this has gone so fast. The goal is to really make these shows 30 minutes tops. Coco Gauff. All right, so I love Coco Gauff. 21 years old, wins the French Open. Fantastic. She's tried many times. This is her second major. You have her second Grand Slam. If you follow tennis, you have 4 big Grand Slam tournaments. You have the Australian Open that begins in January. Then you have the French Open, which goes on in June. Then followed by Wimbledon, which is on grass, and then you have the U.S. Open, which is hard court. I used to be a big tennis fan. Well, Coco Gauff, 21 years old, this black tennis star wins the tournament. Fantastic achievement. But then in the aftermath of that, during the press conference, the lady that she defeated, Aryna Sabalenka, the Belarusian, who's 27 years old, I believe, just baffled everybody. went on and started saying that, yeah, Coco Gauff won, but she didn't win because she played well. And she only won because she played badly. So Aryna, who's the number one ranked player in the world, I mean, it was just baffling. You have to look at that press conference. Totally discounting Coco Gauff's game and effort, and then coming up with excuses about the wind and so on. It was so horrendous. Now we understand the emotion that come after losing and so on. She's the number one player, and but the funny thing is she has played Coco Gauff. They had played 10 times before, and it was 5-5, 5 win, 5 losses, so 50%. And then with this latest final, Coco Gauff beats her. So now Coco Gauff has won 6 times. Aryna Sabalenka has won 5 times. So 6-5 Coco Gauff. So they've played many times and Coco Gauff has beat her. But in this case, total lack of sportsmanship. Uh, but then, I think her PR people saw the fire that was erupting on social media. So the next day, they went on her Twitter profile or X profile and she issued another statement giving credit to Coco Gauff's victory. Just to read you something, saying, yesterday was a tough one. Coco handled the conditions much better than I did and fully deserved the win. Because the day before, she was saying that the wind and so on was too tough. And then she says, she was the better player yesterday and I want to give her the credit she earned. Okay. So that's what you call a PR campaign to try to retract some statement. The big problem here that people are having is not that she's uh, uh, speaking her mind, so she's somebody that can sometimes just run her mouth that way. I mean, fine, but if you want to say that you play badly, no issues there. You can say I played too badly, I didn't play to my standards, fine. But for you now to start pointing the other person and essentially undermining your opponent's victory doesn't bode well. Because it's one thing to say I played poorly and so on. I didn't play to my standard. I made too many errors. We understand. But then when you start saying, no, the opponent actually did not win because she played well. She only won because I played badly. Oh my gosh, that is horrendous. And then she even said that had it been Iga Swiatek, who's another player who had beat Coco Gauff the last time she was in the final in the French Open, if it was the other one, then Coco Gauff would not have won. That was just so petty. But Coco Gauff being very classy, she used as a strategy that Michelle Obama once said, if they go low, you go high. Some people can do it, others can't. But that was very classy from Coco Gauff, the way she responded with class, saying, it's the emotion essentially. She gives her the benefit of the doubt. And so she squashed it, said it's okay. She for a 21-year-old, showcased a lot of poise, a lot of maturity. Now, you have to understand here, just very quickly as I'm wrapping this up, she's only 21 years old, but Roland Garros, the French Open is one of the hardest tournament. It's on clay. Clay, if you play tennis, it's a slow surface, right? Because you have grass, which is the fastest. On grass, the ball just skips. Then you have hard court, which is fast, and then you have clay. So clay is a slower surface. So the rallies tend to be longer. It's more physically draining, which is why a lot of players who are very good on hard court have a hard time on clay because it's a very different game. But Coco Gauff, her first Grand Slam, she won the U.S. Open, I think about 3 years ago, and now she wins this as a 21-year-old. This is somebody who has undergone tremendous pressure, which is why I appreciate her so much. She started very young, like most people in tennis. She's been the prodigy. She's been expected to win, a lot of heavy expectation on her. She's had only done it once in a Grand Slam, even though she's won so many other titles. But winning a second time, kudos to her. It is a worthy story. Sport has the power to obviously bring people together, has the power to influence communities. There's soft power that goes with sport. And so having a young black girl such as her being that successful is great for a lot of young black girls out there, but just, young people in general. So kudos to Coco Gauff. We appreciate what you did. Fantastic. All right, I'm going to end up here for today, as has become the custom. We like ending with a quote. The quote that I will use today is from none other than James Baldwin, and the quote says, essentially, let me see here. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. This is a battle cry, folks. There's a lot of stuff happening in this current political climate. A lot of stuff as we saw when the global pack people denied visas left and right. A lot of work needs to be done. But if we want to transform a lot of these situations, we must act. Yes, not every battle will be won. Even what's happening right now with, the war on immigration with Donald Trump and his people in California and so on. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing will be changed until it is faced. So we need to come together. The mission of this platform, again, the Global Pack, is to build bridges and strong coalition in the Global Pack. That's the global Pan-African communities, people of African descent on the African continent, in Latin America, the Caribbean, the U.S., Europe, but obviously African countries. So coming together, identifying common causes, attacking them together is the best way for us to change some of the narratives, change some of the situation, and elevate Black people and people of African descent around the world. So that's it, folks. If you've not subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It only takes a second. Click on the subscribe button. You become part of this platform. You help this platform grow. If you're a supporter, thank you very much for that. Until next time, remember, we are a beautiful people. We're a strong people. We're a powerful people. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. More importantly, we are the Global Pack. This was Tony Mfumu Simba from Mangumbu. So until next time, peace be with you. Asante sana, which means thank you very much in Swahili. And once again, we are the Global Pack. Thank you very much and see you next time.